Hello and welcome to the Happy Musicians Podcast, where it's not about getting the gig, it's about enjoying it. My name is Tanner Gust, and I'm so grateful to have you with me today. Before I get into it, a couple of quick announcements for you, and this first one I'm especially excited about. Over the last few months, I've been developing some posters, specifically for music educators to put up in their classrooms and studios to provide a bit of joy and positivity to the learning experience. And I finally have the first one finished and available, and it's called 10 Signs You're a Successful Musician. And I'm so pumped about it that I'm just gonna go ahead and read these off for you right now. Here are the 10 signs. You make art you care about with people you care about. You know you're not perfect, and that excites you. Your instrument feels like an extension of yourself. You add value to your community. You have fun when you practice and perform. You support and elevate your bandmates. You express yourself through music, not define yourself by it. You play without physical tension or pain. You strive to get better rather than get good. And finally, you are happy doing what you do. Again, these are available. They're super cute. The design was done by my friend Quinn Hebertson, and you can get a digital version to print yourself. You can get a physical poster sent to you, and you can even get a frame poster. And those are all available at thehappymusicians.com/shop. Announcement number 2 is, again, about the upcoming Gen X conference. I'm presenting alongside a huge list of remarkable musicians, clinicians, and researchers at the Jazz Education Network Virtual Conference. It's running January 6th to the 9th, and my presentation will be on January 8th from 6 to 6:50 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm joined by a panel of wonderful humans and musicians: the drummer Matt Wilson, vibraphonist Sasha Berliner, the trumpet player Chris Johnson, and vocalist Kiana Linnell will all be with me for an informal panel discussion on mental health and wellness in the jazz education community. I'm so excited. I hope you can join us, and you can find more information about that at jazzednet.org. And my final announcement is, if you haven't seen Pixar's Soul yet, I highly recommend you spend your night enjoying that one. It blew me away. It was incredible. It was an amazing capstone to this Pixar journey we've all been on from childhood to adulthood, and I think it captured the creative process and the struggles that we go through in such a clear and provocative way, and I just can't recommend it enough. It had me crying in the first 10 minutes, and I loved every minute of it. That's all the announcements, but before I go on, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who supports and promotes this podcast. No matter how you do it, I'm so grateful, but I especially like to point out those who leave reviews on Apple Podcasts, because it's really fast and free and is the most effective way to help this podcast grow and reach more people. And if you leave a review, there's a chance I will feature your review on a podcast episode, like this one from Ian M-T9 that says, "What we all need to hear. Tanner is a great conversationalist who brings the best out of everyone and anyone he has on." And that means the world, Ian. Much like Pixar's Soul, you're melting this little robot heart. Okay, that's all I got. On to today's episode, which features Stanton Moore. Maybe best known for his 25 plus years as the drummer in the New Orleans funk ensemble Galactic. He's also a wonderful educator, clinician, and entrepreneur. He's a personal teacher and mentor of mine, and went out of his way to make me feel welcome and supported when I got to New Orleans, and helped connect me with incredible musicians and opportunities. And I'm very grateful for the guidance that he has shown me in the past and continues to offer. And it's exciting now to share that with you today. We covered this a bit a few weeks back with Walter Smith III, but the music environment that we're living in is not the same one we went to school for. And that's been really hard for me to wrap my head around, having to let go of what I thought was important in the creative process and embracing new versions of it. And that's something that Stanton has done several times through his career. So we talk about what parts of the past are worth holding on to and preserving, and what parts of the present we should be going all in on and making the most of. We also talk about the relationship between venues and performers, which is something Stanton really understands, not only as a touring artist for several years, but now as a venue owner himself. We talk about the role of musicians as healers and connectors in the community. And we talk about getting things done by any means necessary. That's all I got. Thanks for being here today. And please help me welcome Stanton Moore. Stanton Moore, welcome to the Happy Musicians Podcast.
Yes, indeed. Good to see you, Tanner. Gus.
Good to see you too. I am longing for the days when I can return to New Orleans and catch you at Snug and Tips and hang again.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking forward to when we can play again too. As you know, this has been a challenging period, especially for musicians, but it has been challenging for everyone. But when you focus your entire life on getting better and progressing at something, and then all of a sudden it all gets pulled away, it starts to make you question what's important and where do you then shift your focus. So I am looking forward to playing some gigs. As you were saying, as we were about to start, you've been focusing on streaming, which is super I think it's super important right now. Learning how to connect with people when you can't play in person, right? Mm-hmm. So you've been working on streaming. I've been working on streaming too. So it's all good stuff for us to learn right now, and then hopefully we can continue streaming to other countries and other areas where we maybe not able to travel. But I've been trying to look at all of this, like what can I do now so that that is something that I wouldn't have time to learn regularly, but I can also utilize that ongoing once we get out of here. So things like streaming, continuing to stream gigs, rebuilding my website I've been working on during all this time, getting better at filming, learning InDesign so I can start laying out my own books moving forward. So
yeah, it's funny. You're already hitting all these things that I was thinking I was going to ask you about, and you're just already in the zone of this. I mean, I'm really interested in talking to you. You've been through like several major changes in how the music industry works in like a short amount of time, from being like on the road and with the recording industry at its peak in like 1999, right? And then streaming comes along and the internet comes along, and totally having to reconfigure for those. And then now again for COVID. And it seems just like you are very in tune with how the industry changes, and you managed to adapt really well. And I love to pick your brain about how you see things like this, because it seems like you're already thinking about that in this futurist kind of way of, okay, there's like, it's changing. How do I prepare for it? Because I feel like, especially lately, I'm trying to like preserve old ways of doing things because I think they're so beautiful and great. And I'm not sure if that's like worth the uphill battle, maybe.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic question, and this is something that I've been asking myself and discussing with other friends of mine. And I think that really the most important thing to take away from all of this and to learn is what is important, right? And the most important thing about what we do as musicians is making that connection with the people that we play with. And then also, I mean, supposing you're a solo artist, but making that connection with the audience and realizing that, musicians, we really are healers in a way. And a lot of people consider musicians, artists as unessential. But for the human experience, we're really, I believe, more essential than some people give us credit for. And not to say that we're more essential than frontline workers or doctors or nurses, and that's not what I'm saying whatsoever. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just saying that I think that as healers, musicians and artists are important as well. And so the important thing about that is not the method of delivery, but making sure that you ensure that it is delivered. And so,
Mm.
how we do that, as you said, like in the late 90s, it was via CDs, right? Well, now nobody buys CDs, so now it's streaming and live gigs. Well, now you can't play live gigs. So what I meant by streaming was streaming like Spotify and Apple Music and Pandora and Tidal, and not even video streaming, right?
Right.
So now the methods of delivery are video streaming and Zooms and making video content. But so the methods of delivery have changed, but what it is that you're delivering is still hopefully music or art or something that's going to provide some kind of joy,
Mm-hmm.
enjoyment, and eventually healing properties to the recipient, right?
Yeah.
So, it's funny, like when I meet people that don't know who I am or what I do, or like suppose that I'm at like a business function for my wife's work, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and oh, this is my husband saying, "Oh, what do you do?" And instead of saying, "Oh, I'm a drummer," I say, "I'm a joy provider." And
Hey-o.
they laugh and they're like, "Oh, what does that mean?" It's like, well, I'm a musician and I play drums, but really, what I try to do is convey joy. I have so much joy playing music, playing the drums. I want to try to convey that to people. That's why I started doing this, I think, in the first place. And so when the methods of delivery change, you just have to pivot and shift.
Mm.
And so now we've had to learn how to stream, had to learn how to Zoom, had to learn how to deliver these messages in different ways. But I think what you said, holding on to old ways of doing things, I don't think that that's a, I don't, not to put words in your mouth, but I don't think that that's a fool's errand. I think holding on to the old ways of doing things, well, holding on to actually playing instruments, holding on to playing instruments with people together, interacting, I think all those things are great. I think that if we were to hold on to music, the notion that music is delivered by 8-track tapes, which is
Mm.
before your time, but I can remember my dad playing music on 8 tracks. And so if we were like, oh no, music has to be, it has to be 8-track. Well, then if you
Mm-hmm.
spend your energy on that, well, how about let's spend our energy on we have to make music, and that's the important thing. Providing the content is the important thing, but what form the content comes in, whether it's 8-track vinyl, which is hip again now,
Mm-hmm.
or cassette or CD, and now live stream video, how we deliver it is, I think, secondary to the fact that we actually do deliver it.
Okay. I like that. I guess, yeah, the how question, I maybe haven't thought about as much as like the where question. Like what platform and environment are we creating for these live stream performances and things to be taken in? I guess I mean like in a venue, which you know very intimately now, and I want to get into that later, but you can control the atmosphere that someone takes in and try to create like the ideal experience for healing to take place, right? It's hard to do that for me on like a Facebook live stream when as a user on Facebook, there's so much pressure of like FOMO of what's below this video. And it's kind of hard to invite people to spend an extended amount of time with something on a social platform because it more often feels like the objective is to consume a ton of content, not to spend your time on one piece of content and really get something out of it. And one thing that I really like that you've done is you've gone out of your way to create a space or an environment online where your content can be consumed in like what you think is the best way possible. So you have the Stanton Moore, like the Academy, the Drum Academy.
Right.
And you've kind of curated a space for people to interact with your content in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. I think that luckily I had started on all of that before all of this. And you know, I'm one of many people who are doing that, right? It's not like I came up with that idea, but I've been able to see that, you know, pardon the expression, but been able to see the writing on the wall, which is, okay, I want to do this. Like I love sharing my drumming knowledge. It's not that I love talking in front of a camera and making videos, right? That's not necessarily the process that I love. The process that I love is that drummers come to me and they tell me, hey, this book that you wrote or this DVD that you made, right? Which, who's buying DVDs anymore? So this video that you put out, I worked through it and it changed the way that I play and it changed the way that I think about drumming. And it made my band appreciate me more, and that's made me happier, and that's made my wife like me more, or my significant other like me more. So in a nutshell, you've just enhanced this person's quality of life, not just in their drumming, but in life in general. And through what you've taught or what you've presented in either a writing or a video, and so you know how much time that person had to spend learning that, shedding that, for it to make a difference in their playing, and then hopefully for it to make a difference in their life. So once started getting that kind of feedback, then I started feeling like, oh, okay, wow, I really want to do that. I have all this knowledge up here about drums and drumming, and if I can share that with people in a way that it will help improve their drumming abilities, their musicality, and maybe even their quality of life, that's what I want to keep doing, right? And hopefully I'll have, you know, if I'm lucky, maybe another 50 years, right, to do all that. So do I want to keep giving away all of that percentage to a publisher, or do I want to bite the bullet, climb this momentous mountain of a learning curve and start learning how to write this stuff out, engrave it myself, lay it out, right? So learn finale, learn InDesign, and then so I've done those things. Not in any way that anybody would want to hire me. Like I've done it. I can get my ideas from here onto a page, right? Yeah. And share them with my people who want to know that. And so I've, you know, learned those things and then have enlisted people to help me with the video stuff, right?
Right.
And, you know, right now Nick Solnick is helping me film, and maybe hopefully you'll be able to help me edit.
Yeah.
You know, ongoing. And so I'm seeking help where I know that I need help. But the important thing is not necessarily the how I get the ideas from here or the method of delivery, because it used to be books, it used to be DVDs. Now it's PDFs and it's videos and live streams. But what is important is that I do share this information And so sharing music, yes, but then sharing drum information as well to provide joy, right? Because if somebody improves in their drumming and then it becomes a better musician through that, and then hopefully their quality of life improves, well, that's in some way providing joy as well. And so the methods of delivery have to be secondary to you just got to do it. Like you just got to deliver it, get it out there by any means necessary. And I'll be honest, like for somebody who, I'm going to be self-effacing at this moment, it's funny. Like I don't feel old, but it's funny. It's like, oh, I guess I've been doing this for a while when you do realize like, yes, like I started touring in the heyday of, late 90s record industry where people were still making a lot of money off records. And then everything started going digital. And now, you can't even play gigs. So it's like, wow, like when you put it that way. But the important thing is to just keep moving forward. You've got to keep trying to create music and art and share joy with people, no matter how it's delivered.
Okay, I love that the foundation, you keep coming back to the why you're doing it and this basis of sharing joy and spreading that. And I think that's incredible that everything you're doing is coming from that foundation. But just to play devil's advocate or to clarify, I mean, I guess the thing that I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around is that if it's like deliver it by any means necessary, if you were to take like, I don't know, the TikTok approach where you're a content creator or influencer and you give away all your stuff for free and then you like generate revenue on the back end from like an endorser, or like this platform gives you a certain amount because you garner a huge audience, right? Like if you were to take all of the lessons that you've prepared, and if you're like, I got to give them away by like, get it out there by any means necessary, rather than having a walled garden approach where you have a website that people sign up for to interact with your content in a meaningful way. If you just gave it all away for free, like, I don't know how that would work for people. Cause I mean, like you are providing not only for yourself, but for other people that work with you. And like, if you were to give all this information away for free, it would like saturate the market. Even like other people who are trying to create web-based platforms might not get people signing up because there's so much great content available just for free then. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so by any means necessary, I didn't mean for free. I meant when I started, so let me take a little step back. So when I started writing,
well, and not to accuse you because you don't do that, but I'm just saying that is something that happens a lot, and it worries me.
Yeah, so it worries me too, and so I try not to give stuff away for free. Like I do give some stuff away for free to draw people in, but so what I mean by any means necessary is when I first started writing books, I would write out notation by hand, and then I would write all the text in Word, right? In just a word processor. And then I would print that out and then cut it with scissors. So I can tell you how many times I've had scissors confiscated by airport security. So I used to travel with scissors, Scotch tape, and whiteout. And so then I would copy all that. So I'd be on the road, and then I would go into Kinko's, and I'd, just feeding the copier, all these pages. And then I would mail it to the publisher. I did it this way for the first 2 books that I wrote.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so it's like, well, I have these ideas. I want to get them into the minds and hands and thoughts of other drummers. So by any means necessary, I first started doing it that way. Just, okay, I got to write it out. then I got to cut it out, then paste it, and then so I would get a blank piece of paper, then tape the text, then tape the handwritten notation, which I'd write it on staff paper, then tape text, then copy that, and then mail that to the publisher. So then I started realizing, well, I'm giving away, like, you know, most deals with publishers, the artist makes like 12%. So I'm giving away 88%. And I want to do this for another 50 years. So maybe I should learn how to engrave and lay stuff out. So that's what I've been doing for the last several years. So now I've got all this and I can put it up on my site as PDFs. And right now I'm having people subscribe and they get access to the PDFs, right? So I eventually will probably sell PDFs on my site as well, right? So yes, you need to monetize it. But what I was talking about with any means necessary was, all right, I started off like writing it out by hand and cutting it with scissors. And now, but you just got to start, right? Now I'm refining it and I'm doing it in ways that are going to benefit me more moving forward. But if I would have said, oh, I can't write my first book until I know finale and I know InDesign, then we wouldn't have those first two books because I would have never started.
Yeah.
You've got to just start. And that's why I started live streaming on Wednesday nights through Facebook Live with my computer open just like this.
Yeah.
That's why, you know, as I was telling you before we got on, I just moved and I haven't had a chance to set up my home situation. My studio situation is doing great now. And, you know, but I started by just opening up the computer while we were in super lockdown mode and just streaming. And I was like, Wednesday nights are probably good for me because once I start touring again, you know, I'll be flying out on Thursdays and Fridays, stuff like that. But Wednesday nights I might be able to maintain. So now I'm back in my studio on Wednesday nights, and Nick and I have learned how to stream. But if I would have waited to start going live until we completely knew how to stream, I wouldn't have put myself in the hot seat. And I put myself in the hot seat to just go live. And at first I was just playing drums, and it was like distorted, and I knew that. Right? But I was like, let me just do it and connect with people. It's about that connection. And hopefully providing joy and providing a sense of connection. And then I'll get better each week. So I got an interface, and then I got a lav, and then I got a lavalier with the foot switch. And then eventually was able to go into my studio, which already had cameras, but we weren't hooked up to Ethernet, and we weren't streaming yet. And so I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and my wife was like, why can't you sleep? And I'm like, I have to get a drill bit and drill through the cinder block wall and get Ethernet tapped into the galactic router. And she's like, what are you even talking about? And what I was saying was like, I need to be streaming because I knew that if I did, then I would start, hopefully, I hoped, but it's happening, get masterclasses with places like Drummers Collective, which is coming up in January. Drum Trainer in Berlin, which I did something that they helped co-host with something called International Drummer Meeting, right? And that was hosted by a drum school in Berlin. And I've done something for Memphis Drum Shop and something for University of the Arts in Philadelphia. I just did my virtual drum camp. I just did my drum camp virtually for, you know, I had 30 people in the Zoom. And those were paid attendees, right? But I had to get streaming. And if I would have waited till everything was perfect, I might not have made it. I might still be like, oh, I gotta get around to that. It's like No, get around to it. Like, do it. Just do it. And that's what I mean by any means necessary. Like, open the computer. If that's all you got, then just do that.
Yeah.
Right? Just do that and start going live, and then dial it in as you can. Just like when I started first going on the road with Galactic, our first van was a 1978 Ford Econoline van that was my parents' van. That was the van that I went to Disney World in when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And then went to Disney World with my parents again in that same van when I was 15 years old. But that's the van that we bought and started touring the country until that van gave out and we had to leave it behind and rent a U-Haul to get home. We had to rent like a U-Haul trailer to get home, and that died in New Mexico. And then we bought another van that was like 10 years younger, and that van died in New Mexico. So I don't know what it is about New Mexico, but it was very hard on vans for us. But and so that's, that's what I mean by this ethos. Like this is how I've built my career. It's just like, just you got to start doing it. And then it's like, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but that's why one of my biggest influences is Evel Knievel, right? Because he would just go for it. And it's like, maybe he was going to make it. Maybe he was going to wind up in the hospital. But when he went for it, there were real consequences. Like, he could actually die. So us as musicians learning how to, learn new skills like Finale or InDesign. It's like, it's great if you can learn those skills. But when Evel Knievel first started jumping stuff, he was jumping a few cars at a time. Like, not buses and not canyons, but he just went for it. And sometimes he wouldn't make it. But that's why it's like, well, if he can do it, and when he wouldn't make it, there was real injury involved. It's like, well, then what do I have to be scared of? What do we as musicians have to be scared of? It's like, let's just go for it. And you know what? We're going to be a little bit embarrassed that our production quality isn't great. It's like, we'll get better as we go, And so
that's helping me figure some stuff out. Honestly, I really like that. I think like learning to play music, especially in a conservatory setting, it's really drilled into you that you're creating this performance that you rehearse up and you get it all ironed out and you have it ready to go. And that always puts me in this box when I'm thinking like that of, okay, so I want to start putting out TikTok material, but I'm spending all this time thinking about how do I make it as ideal as possible from the get-go, as opposed to just starting it and finding it along the way. And I think I'm still warming up to the benefits of the short shelf life of social content, like this isn't your album that people listen to forever. This is just like an Instagram video. And if it doesn't work out, like that's not the end of the world. And that's great to keep in mind.
Yeah. And, as you say, coming from a conservative background, I went to music school. And so I know what it is to try to be too perfect or to put so much pressure on yourself. But I learned a heck of a lot about drumming and music just by walking in to Preservation Hall and then having Shannon Powell be like, hey, come sit down and play drums. I'm going to get up and play tambourine and sing. Mm-hmm. And you sit down and you play and you're in the hot seat. And Shannon had the room sounding, feeling amazing. And now you're sitting down completely cold. And then how are you going to make something out of nothing?
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. How are you going to do it? By any means necessary. There is no rehearsal. There is no run through. There is no, it's like, oh, Oh, and you don't, by the way, you don't know the song.
Yeah, you don't know the song, you haven't played that kit before, your
Yeah.
hands are freezing.
Right, but you've got to make it happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
You learn a lot about, oh, we're going to make it happen as we go. And then hopefully in time, take what you learn and when the opportunities arise, create content, create moments that count that will be left behind when we're not here anymore, hopefully, right? But the process, there's also the process, and the process, you can't get too involved in every step of the process being perfect.
Okay.
But you know that, okay, I mean, for me, this is what I'm saying. I know that I've learned a lot about playing and creating a performance because I've had to make a performance happen in front of an audience who is sitting at Press Hall, they're having a great time, and who's this dude who sits down? And it's like, don't disappoint Shannon, don't disappoint the audience, make it happen. Same thing when you walk into the Maple Leaf and Russell Baptiste is just crushing it. And he's like, come sit down and play. And you're like, oh my God, right? Johnny Vodakovich putting you in the hot seat when it's Snug Harbor. And so then I learn a lot about music and making something happen so that when I get a chance to actually make a record, I'm a much better musician. I'm a much better performer. I'm a much better communicator. I'm a much better joy provider because of these processes that I've been through, because of these moments that I've been through that have put me in the hot seat, and I've either had to make it or break it with no preparation. Make it or break it by any means necessary without having perfect camera angles and great lighting and good equipment. It's like, no, man, we're live. Like, you just walked in the room and now you're sitting at the drums and you gotta make it happen. And those parts of the process are very formative as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and now you're sometimes on the other end of that where Ian and I'll show up at Snug and you call us in the hot seat, and Torque and James, yeah, I don't know what just happened, tear us apart and put us through the ringer, you know?
Right. And I've watched you guys sound better and better, right? You guys, and the last time you sat in, I remember especially, you just were sounding so good, like coming so far. And that comes from, yes, practicing, yes, rehearsing and preparing stuff, but also you start to get more comfortable in uncomfortable situations, right?
Yeah.
That Snug Harbor situation, that's why I started that trio with David Torkanowski and James Singleton, because those guys are two of the most experienced musicians that I can think of. And also, Torque especially can be one of the most intimidating musicians I've ever played with. So I wanted to play with those guys on a regular basis to keep myself in the hot seat, right? And we grow a lot by putting ourselves into uncomfortable situations. And that's what I wanted to do by starting that trio with those two guys.
Yeah.
So, kudos to you and Ian for continuing to show up because that can be a very stressful, daunting, intimidating, and frightening situation to be in, right?
Yeah. And they relish in making it as frightening as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And challenging and yeah.
Yeah, and then rewarding, of course, at the end of the day.
Right. And if you put yourself in that position and if it doesn't quite happen, you don't rise to the occasion as much as you wished, well then what do? you go home and you shed that, you work on that, you make sure that next time that they call a tune at 320 beats per minute, you've got it covered. Or next time they call, you know, Magnolia Triangle, Dewey, or something in 7 that you haven't heard before, that you know what that is, right? And that's how I've learned, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I want to pivot a bit because I want to get your take on this for sure. I want to discuss the relationship between musicians and venues, and then also venues in the greater community. And I think you'll have an interesting perspective on it. I mean, as a road warrior for so many years, I mean, I have to imagine you've hit like countless venues across the States and abroad. And I'm curious how much of the success that you've had on the road has come from your relationship with you and the people who run the venue.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say a lot. I would say, you know, a great deal. Because a lot of the reason that, at least, you know, with Galactic, and then I've tried to operate in this way too. A lot of our success, touring wise, well, for Galactic, it was that we were very deliberate about the way we were touring. So we decided, okay, we don't want to just go out and play a bunch of places on the West Coast, and then we're like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to play the West Coast for 4 or 5 weeks, come home for 4 weeks, then play the East Coast for 4 or 5 weeks, then come home. And so that created a 3-month cycle. So we would do that every quarter, basically, so that people knew we were coming back every 3 months. And then we would play a venue sometimes 3, 4, or more times before we would sell it out. Then we would sell it out, then we would continue to play it, then we might move to the next venue. And then we would do the same thing. So, you know, and then there are venues that became our homes, you know, for a long time, like the Fillmore in San Francisco. And Michael Bailey there at the Fillmore, we became friends with him, and we always treated him with respect, and we always did the best job we could. And he knew that when he brought us there, it was pretty much a guaranteed sellout. So it was like repeat business, you know. Now, Peter Shapiro, owner of the Brooklyn Bowl and the Capitol Theater, and he's also promoted gigs for Dead and Company, and so Peter and we got on Zoom the other night, right, and toasted each other, and just to check in with each other. And so we play once a year for the last several years, up until recently. We would do 4 nights in a row at the Brooklyn Bowl, right? And that was repeat business. Peter knows that, you know, when we show up, we're going to be respectful. We're, you know, nobody in our organization is a prima donna, or nobody's going to, you know, tear up the dressing room, or you know, act like act in any way that would be disrespectful or to his staff or his crew or their equipment. You know, we're not gonna go walk up to the monitor guy and yell at the monitor guy and spill a giant beer into their console, right? Like, you know, I'm just trying to think of a ridiculous thing that could happen. Like they know that it makes sense to do business with, right? So we tried to operate that way, and our entire careers in the same way, you know, with me as well. I do that when I'm doing my own things. You know, with my trio, I think we've been to Japan and played multiple night runs at the Cotton Club. I don't know, I think we were just this year, right after Jazz Fest, we were headed back for, I think, our 4th or 5th time. And And so you develop these relationships with promoters and with clubs, and it's very important, and repeat business. And then you keep repeating that business for us until we could grow to the next club. But sometimes the next club was owned by the same promotion, by the same promoter, right? Same promotion company. So it just makes good sense as a musician to always be respectful, always be kind, always be generous, and always be grateful. Right? You don't, as I'm saying, as a musician, you nobody owes it to you for you to be playing that stage. You don't own the right to play that venue or that stage, no matter how hard you've worked or where you come from or who you think you are. You always, for me as a musician, I always try, no matter what stage or venue we're playing, I always try to remember that, hey man, yes, we've worked hard to get here, but I'm very grateful to be here because nobody owes it to me to be here. And there's a line of people, in the promoter's inbox. By line, I mean like a whole list of people that keep reaching out to the promoter who want to play this venue, who want to play on a Saturday night here, right? So, we as musicians are replaceable. I think we're important, and as artists, what we do is important in a healing sense. But, if you're going to act in a way that people don't want to work with you, then there's a line of people who will show up that are workable, Might have something to say differently artistically, but, the world's not going to come to an end if so-and-so doesn't play music anymore.
Right. Well,
So-and-so being, I have to remind myself of that too.
Yeah, I think it's really easy as musicians to get frustrated about, like the pay for a night of live music has been pretty stagnant for a long time. And it's easy to get mad and immediately blame the venues for that. And something that I try to keep in mind is that even though there are instances where the venue is just not fairly compensating, even before the pandemic, so many restaurants and bars and things were on such a tight budget. It's very hard to make those work. And I'm curious, well, two questions, like how did your relationship at like artist venue relationship mindset change when you bought tips at Tipitina's? And then what has your experience been like now as a venue owner in the pandemic?
Yeah, so just a little bit more general answer to your question. I agree with you that I wish that the general musicians were paid and compensated more. Of course, I think the general public tends to see some musicians and they see that they're making a lot of money, and that's great, and that's awesome. But that's a very small percentage of people who
it's tiny.
make a living playing music. And a working musician is usually a pretty blue collar job. I mean, it's a lot of hard work, not just practicing and rehearsing and setting up gear and tearing down gear and staying late after the gig, waiting to get paid, hoping to get paid. I mean, all these things, right? So what I'm hoping after all of this is that there's a greater appreciation for musicians, music, live venues.
Yeah, for sure.
In the general public. Now that the general public sees what life can be like without live music, without restaurants, without musicians and venues, right?
Yeah.
And you notice that every time things open up a little bit, restaurants are packed. People are showing up. Like, we've been doing sidewalk gigs at Tipitina's and people are showing up. Like, we can't announce it more than the day before because too many people will show up. That's awesome. We want to make sure that we keep things safe right now while we're still in the pandemic. But it's telling me that people are starved for the healing properties of music and what live music provides and what venues provide, right? So I'm hoping that once we get out of this, people, because of their appreciation for music, musicians, venues, will be a little bit more supportive in general, right? If everybody just was a little bit more of the attitude of, oh yeah, we have to pay for music. Like, oh yeah, like, I show up to a venue and there's a band playing and they ask me for $5, which is not a lot, at the door, maybe less people will be like, oh, well, I don't care. I just want to get a drink. Well, I'm glad that you want to get a drink, but there's also a band playing. And, if the general public coming out of this, if more, of course, it's just going to be a percentage thing, right? If a larger percentage of the general public have a greater appreciation for music and a greater willingness to support music, I think that that'll be a silver lining coming out of all of this. And of course, not everybody's going to have a greater appreciation, but I'm hoping that more people do.
Yeah.
Those are the things I've tried to find throughout all of this. What are the possible silver linings that we can put energy behind? That we can, instead of being like, yeah, musicians have been paid the same since the 70s and we just keep getting paid the same. Just saying that just now didn't feel good to me. So let's not say that. Let's say, yeah, people appreciate music. People love music. And I want to keep doing this because I want to keep providing that music, that happiness, that joy for the people who appreciate it. Let's focus on the people who appreciate it, the support that we do get, not what we're not getting.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's easy. I'm laughing because I'm almost thinking of it as like in the debate there was all that, or in the election there was all the talk about how Democrats were so focused on getting, like, trying to sway on the fence Republicans from last election instead of focusing on their base, And I'm over here trying to think about like all these listeners who aren't active listeners and how can we convince them to be active listeners instead of focusing on the active listeners who are already there.
Yeah, exactly. And, of course, you want to sway some people who might be on the fence, right? Either politically or music listener wise. But two, focusing on that base is important.
Mm-hmm.
Too. And what I've been trying to focus on lately is like, well, because it's easy, as it's easy to get wrapped up in looking at Instagram, looking at YouTube and be like, oh, shoot, I don't have as many followers as I'd like, or I don't have as much traction as I'd like. It's like, you know what? Pardon my French, but F that.
Yeah.
Let me focus on the 30 people who showed up to my drum camp. Let me be unbelievably excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
Let me create more lessons for them. This morning I woke up at 5:59 a.m., made coffee, and I practiced here in my office, which I've got a little kit, which maybe I'll show you in a minute, and started writing and finishing up a lesson that I'm excited to release. Right, so I'm finishing up during these times. I've been learning InDesign, and I'm finishing up 3 chapters. Right, and
Yeah.
it's going to be a course on short rolls, the 5, the 6, and the 7. And this morning I've worked on cleaning up and making sure spell checking, editing, spacing, all that stuff on the first 4 pages of this 14-page lesson about 6-stroke rolls, right? And instead of waking up and being like, oh, I don't have this, or it's like, man, screw that. I can't wait to film these 3 lessons for the people who do care about it, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm excited about, and that's what I'm going to put my energy behind.
I love it. That's so awesome. I know we're kind of running out of time. You got a lesson coming up. I have one quick question. And okay, so there's this new stimulus package and there's 15 billion allotted for venues. Like how important is that? Do you think that this was like enough? I don't know how in tune you are with it, but at least to me, it seems like a great thing. And I want to make sure that as a venue owner, you're like, yeah, this was what we needed.
Well, it is a great thing. But also let's not count chickens before they hatch. Let's make sure that these funds actually get to the venues that need them.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is a great thing. We're very grateful, very thankful that Congress moved on this and is making this happen. And we as venue owners and as in contact with all the other venue owners that we know, as an industry, are very hopeful, cautiously optimistic. This could be great. So, it's definitely better than $0.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be enough? I hope so. I don't know. Time will tell, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. We're definitely grateful, and we definitely are hopeful, moving forward.
That's awesome. Well, I think you got to run in a sec. If you want to, real quick, just let listeners know what stuff you want them to find on the internet. Send them to the right places, things you got coming up that you want them to be aware of.
Yeah, so I continue filming and writing for StantonMooreDrumAcademy.com, and not to give too much of a sales pitch, but if anybody watching is interested in what I am presenting drumming wise, there's a free 14-day trial. Just go to the homepage, StantonMooreDrumAcademy.com. People can try it out before they decide to sign up. Mm-hmm. And that's where I've been releasing a lot of my lessons, drumming knowledge. And really that's the most important thing that I want to direct people to right now. And then, of course, my YouTube channel and anything else they want to check out on Instagram or Facebook, it's all under Stanton Moore. I'm pretty easy to find.
Yeah, for sure.
But the thing that I've been putting my most energy behind right now is the Drum Academy and sharing with that. Eventually, I'll be doing more live streams with bands. Tipitinas.tv. I've been filming. I feel like I'm basically the house drummer this season. Played with Galactic for Halloween. Played with The Last Waltz. And played with Dragon Smoke. Mm-hmm. Right. Played 3 of 6 episodes. I'm very fortunate, man, to have been having some gigs and all of that throughout all of this. So, anybody watching this, anything that we released with Tipitinas, new merch items from Tipitinas.com, Tipitinas.tv, any way that people want to stream, want to support, any way that people want to support, because I know not everybody's a drummer. Mm-hmm. So, if you want to buy one of my vinyl off my website or buy a t-shirt from Tipitinas, it all helps.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's been incredible catching up, and I'm excited to see what comes, and hopefully we'll be back in the same city soon.
I hope so, man. It's great to catch up with you,
Yeah.
and I look forward to when I can see you in person.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Stanton.
All right, Tanner. Take care, buddy.
Yeah. Peace out.
All right, bye.
That does it for this episode of the Happy Musicians Podcast. The music comes straight from Stanton's most recent Wednesday night live stream. I would definitely check it out if you're a drummer, or if you're a musician who wants to learn more about New Orleans music and see a great example of what an effective live stream looks like. I have links to that and everything else we talked about in this episode at thehappymusicians.com. Also on the website is a blog with essays about the topics brought up in these interviews. There's a free daily music recommendation service called Fresh Picks, and there's a shop in there. In addition to the posters I mentioned earlier, there are t-shirts and hoodies and practice field mugs. It's a fantastic way to support the podcast, but also bring home a positivity-fueled product for your own life. Thank you so much for taking some time and energy out of your day to listen to this episode. I hope it helped and added value to your life, and if it did, please do me a huge favor and share it with someone. You can send it in a text, or you can follow us on social media at The Happy Musicians and share our post there. And finally, you can leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts to throw some fire on that algorithm for us. And that's all I got. I hope you join me again next week, and until then, stay happy.